And welcome back to Time Notice TV.
Today's video is the last video in the body horror series. At the beginning of the series, I discussed possibly doing an extra episode for Halloween. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna enjoy my Halloween night. And you guys should do that too if you celebrate. If not, it's no big deal. But anyway, today is the last video in the body horror tutorial series. So today's video, we are going to be looking at how to do blisters, and this one actually is going to be combining all of the different skin types because this character is a nurse. So I figure, she's probably been around a multitude of diseases and would probably be displaying a multitude of symptoms if this is a horror-based character, if this is, say, a nurse that's turned into a monster that's in an abandoned ward of some sort. And this character is located in a nursery, so I figured the best way to combine this prompt with these techniques is to look at hand, foot, and mouth, which is a disease that is usually seen in infants and young children but can be transferred to adults. So that's how I'm going to be exploring the blisters texture along with the rashes that we looked at in the first video. I'm not going to give her multiple limbs. Well, anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I was able to show restraint and did not end up giving this nurse character multiple limbs. However, the entity in her hands is a different story. For most of the drawing, and I kind of did this intentionally, not intentionally, the boils, which were supposed to be the highlighted technique, I don't end up doing the boils until the very end of the drawing, but slight spoiler, I basically just ended up using my typical bubble technique, but with skin tones instead of blues and white. So if you want to skip ahead to the end of the video and watch me make these characters boils, you can do that and then go back and watch the rest of it, or however you want to do it. But for the interim of the drawing, I thought it would be kind of fun to read some hospital horror stories, some paranormal tales from nurses and doctors. So I scoured the internet and found a couple of forums that have a collection of these stories. Initially, I was going to read a creepypasta so that it wouldn't be as close to home for some people, especially for people who are already afraid of hospitals. So if you are afraid of hospitals, maybe just mute the video and watch the drawing, or click off of this video altogether if you're, too sensitive about things like this, or if you've had an experience and you don't feel like you can handle creepy hospital stories. But yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and read a few of these accounts that I've been able to find, and I'll post the links down below so that you can read some, because I'm not going to read all of them. There are quite a few stories, but that's to be expected in a place where there is so much life and death happening at the same time. So here we go. I'm an EMT and eat this stuff up. I'm not necessarily religious, on the fence about it, but I've experienced some stuff I cannot explain. I can recall one fairly well. I was in the basement of the hospital grabbing a new gurney as ours was ripped apart from a violent patient. It was 3 a.m. PICU was on the 3rd floor and it was locked down for the night. No visitors in the hospital. The basement storage unit was packed with stuff, so when I felt my shirt get pulled, I assumed it got caught on an object. Then it happened again. Only this time I heard a little girl's voice, crystal clear, saying, "I'm lost!" My heart was pounding. I felt all the hairs on my body stand up, and I called my partner down to help with the gurney. I've talked to nurses, CNAs, and even some physicians who've had weird experiences, especially in the ICU and hospice side. I've worked in healthcare for over 20 years now. I have a couple stories from working in nursing homes of seeing the figure in black shooting across the hall, and then in the next 24 hours a resident will die, and then in less than a week another one will pass on as well. But my favorite story is this. I worked at a very small hospital, maybe 30 beds. It had been around for many years. And the basement is, of course, the old morgue, and there is one elevator that goes from this basement to the main floor outside the nurse's station. This elevator would come up in the middle of the night randomly, and the doors would open, and all the staff would get up to find the patient who had just passed away. One night, my coworkers and I were sitting at the nurse's station, and down the short hall to our right, we hear this TV come on, and the volume is up as loud as it can go. One of my CWs and I walk down said hall to find the TV to turn it down. There is one room down the hall that maintenance has the door closed and a do not enter sign on the door. After looking in all the open rooms, there is no other room but the closed one to look in. We open the door, and there is nothing in this room except the TV. I walked in, turned the TV down, and said, "Stop that. There is a sick baby next door who needs to sleep, so please be quiet." I walked out, closed the door, and there were no further incidents with the TV. When I was a student, I got called in on a stroke patient. She had coded, and they were doing CPR. They worked for 45 minutes, but she died. They cleaned her up and called on the family to say goodbye. At the time the family left, she had been both brain dead and without a pulse for more than 45 minutes. Blood had filled her brain, she was completely gray and started to smell. Suddenly, she sat up and called for her family. The nurses rushed to get the monitors and equipment back on her. She started working on her again, and she stabilized, said goodbye to her family, and promptly died a second time. I used to work in a skilled nursing facility. I was usually assigned to the Alzheimer's ward. One night, I'm in the linen room stocking my cart, and I heard someone shuffle up behind me, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around, and there was no one else in the room. The door was still shut, too. Another lady started to complain that a man was coming into her room at night. Again, Alzheimer's, so I didn't think much of it. So to reassure her, I told her I'd check on her throughout the night. She complained of this man every night for 2 more weeks, and when I asked her to describe him to me, "He's real handsome and wears a black suit." "Oh, he's right behind you now, honey." That freaked me out. Of course, there was no one behind me. She died the next night in her sleep. This sounds very similar to a lot of Man in the Hat stories. If you're not familiar with the Man in the Hat, he's usually associated with death and sleep paralysis, so give it a look if you're not familiar. Back when I worked in domiciliary care, I was visiting a patient with full-on dementia. Couldn't communicate, just laid in bed. I'll call him Andrew. Obviously, Andrew required 2 people to help turn him, change him, etc. I walked into Andrew's room one morning, and out of the corner of my eye, saw a man, at least 6 foot tall, dressed in black trench coat, black boots, and a black hat, standing over Andrew and just staring down at him. The moment I looked properly, the apparition had gone. I didn't get a sense of malice or anything, it was just observing him. My colleague, who came through 30 seconds later, said I looked white as a sheet. I don't believe in ghosts, but I can't explain that one besides maybe a bird flying past the window and casting a shadow that my brain misinterpreted, or something. I used to work in a personal care home. A couple of times a day or so after a resident had passed, their call bell would go off in their room. No one was in the room when the call bell went off on any of the occasions. We had one resident die pretty traumatically. Nurses had to perform CPR because he was at full code. That night, the midnight staff said they saw him at the end of the hall, just walking down like he always did. Then the alarm on the door to the outside, it was a secured unit, went off. It was the door he always tried when he was looking to get out. At my old hospital, we had Susie. We were never a unit working with children, but everyone who encountered her claimed her to be about 8 years old. We usually only saw a shadowy figure or heard her running over the unit floors at night. Sometimes she messed with the lights, call lights, computers, or old paper charts. She didn't seem malevolent, and a stern, "Not now, Susie, I'm busy," usually kept her in line. She did not like swearing, though. One of our newer doctors once made the mistake to tell her to F off. After that, bad luck seemed to follow him whenever he stepped onto the unit. Misplacing his coffee mug, just for it to show up later exactly where he had put it down before, but now ice cold. Charts disappearing, lights turning off in the middle of him placing an IV, which prompted me to call her out and her turning the light back on, his chair going down to the lowest setting every time he sat down, Even if we switched chairs, the chair would work perfectly fine for anyone but him. We had him apologize to her and it all stopped, or at least he wasn't that specifically targeted anymore. I kind of miss her. We're getting to the end of the video, so I'll share one more story that has a wholesome, happy ending. Sort of. I'm an RN, and while I was a student, I was caring for a lady who had end-stage renal failure and had a DNAR and was shutting down. We were having a little chat when she stopped, looked over my shoulder, and said, "Bill's here, love. I've got to go," and swiftly stopped breathing. I read over her old notes. Bill was her deceased husband. So that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you have enjoyed this video and this mini spooky series with these mini tutorials. Yeah, I will see you guys not next week, but next month for the revival of the color palette challenge, if we can call it that, because this was a pretty short break. And I will be, for the month of November, trying to do a drawing a day. I will most likely be doing live streams, probably at different times a day. I'll try to keep it relatively consistent, but I will be coming out with a little video. So if any of you want to draw along with the color palettes that I will be using, I will have that up on my Instagram, and I will have the video up here on YouTube. So keep an eye out for that. Until then, I'll see you guys next time. Have a spooky day.